Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution.
Supposed to be sisters and brothers. Freedom. Can you hear them crying out? Freedom. I hear the people shouting for freedom. Freedom. Can you hear them crying out? Freedom. People are dying for freedom. Can you hear them crying out? Freedom. I hear the people shouting for freedom. Can you hear them crying out? Crossed by the multitude. Can you feel the joy that it brings? Let every voice sing. Injustice in our lives gives us all common ground. The time for peace has come and we need it now.
Good morning and good morning and good morning to everyone who's here, coming in live from all over and everywhere around the globe. Whether you're here at home in my home state in Illinois at Chicago, we are here. I am Senabella, your host for Coffee Break, and it's my pleasure to have you here this morning. I'm excited to get started this year with all kind of wonderful hosts, people who are coming in and co-hosting, as well as who are guests on the show, and a lot of wonderful topics, a variety of people and things. And today we're going to bring into the room Professor Hunter Adams, who's fresh off his G20 summit, and he's going to be discussing his book, We Were Never Slaves. Really just one of the most important pieces of work that I've read in quite a while, and I was quite fascinated with him. I had the opportunity of meeting Hunter many years ago now, and over the years have come to have the opportunity through Dwight McKee, who recently passed last year, one of our ancestors now, God rest his soul. I really miss him, but what he gave to me in so much life were these characters, these people who were thought leaders and creating avenues of change and opening up doors for us to become more aware of who we are, how we can create, build, and grow our communities, and one person at a time, with this sort of evidence of success by the actions that continue to be made and by planting seeds and creating new people who would come and take those messages up and continue that. So today, Professor Hunter, who is a thought leader, I will say, and just an amazing individual who's had a wonderful life of many wonderful things, but his mind, you're going to find out today what caused him, what stimulated that idea to write the book, We Were Never Slaves. How did that come about? And why is that still important for us to know? Because a lot of us have grown up and don't even talk about if we were ever slaves. And some people have said to me over my years, because I'm old enough to say that I have friends who say, well, you know, my family, we come from a family where we weren't slaves. And I'm like, oh, okay. How do you escape being a slave in America, right? How do you escape being a slave anywhere, really, in the world? And we think about the word slave comes from Slavs, right? and we know about that whole history of Slavic people who were enslaved, indentured slaves, and were never set free. And then finally they were free, and they have a whole nother history. In fact, Professor Hunter has stories about that as well. So not to delay, and because time is so precious, let's bring Professor Hunter in the room. And if I call him doctor, it's because that's what I see him. He's definitely a doctor. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, and good morning to your family here. Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate it. Wow, there's so much going on in the world right now. There's always things going on, but we are in a very perilous time, particularly in the United States. Other places, Iran, the Congo, Haiti. No one talks about Haiti now, and you have to remember that in over 200 years ago, Haiti, the Haitian people freed themselves from French domination and oppression. So I'm happy to be here, and I have a few things to say. You can't cover everything in 60 minutes, but I think your audience will appreciate some new knowledge, or at least new perspectives on a lot of things.
Absolutely. I think that's what's important, to the new perspectives, because they are born out of what has been history and how we've looked at that, and whether or not that history has formulated an answer that works in today's climate. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. And we have to remember right now we're held hostage to a certain kind of history, right? Alternative facts, as it's said popularly today. And the book, when it comes out, hopefully in the spring, officially, we'll address that and a lot of things.
Well, it's interesting that you say it's coming out in the spring, because we've been talking about it, and you've been talking about it on different seminars and different scenarios all over the place. Why don't, before we get into that, let's talk about your trip to the G20 summit. Why don't you talk about briefly how it is that you came about joining the G20 summit, and how that has affected, if at all, your work?
Oh, well, first, there's a number of G20 country summits. G20, for people who may not be familiar with, are the 20 largest economies in the world, right? So that's what G20 means.
Okay.
So for me, an organization that I'm a part of called Humanity Summit Think Tank were invited by someone in the South African government to come there because we went to the G20 Social Engagement Summit. That's technically what I participated in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil last year. And how that came about, we were at the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent in Geneva, and I read my statement about slavery. I'll share with you that shortly. And there was a member of parliament from Brazil, from the state of Bahia. And after she heard us, we had dinner, and she said, "Hey, you should come to Rio de Janeiro and present this, because there were some issues that the G20 were not discussing." And Senabella, three of them were human rights, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Gender rights, and racism. Those three things were not on the formal agenda. So we went there. That was an amazing experience. And that was the first time that a president, because President Lula said he wanted the people to engage, right, these other 19 nations. And so there needed to be a separate space for them to bring their concerns. So he in turn present them to the larger body of the other 19 nations. So that's how this started.
Mhm.
So there was someone from South Africa there, and they heard ours, and there was like 40 or so different uh, NGOs and civil society organizations, and we were the only ones that were from outside of Brazil. So it was an honor to be present in Brazil last year, rather in 2024. I'm sorry. So, so then they heard us, heard what we had to say, because one of the biggest problems in the world is gender issues, and this is the female solution, and women are being beat down lots of places, and that was not on their agenda.
It's interesting to hear you say that that's one of the biggest problems in the world is gender issues with so many things that
More specific,
I'm sorry,
gender violence,
gender violence. Okay. Okay. That
not
makes
just
sense.
gender issues, but particularly gender violence.
Yes.
It's a huge issue in Brazil. It's a huge issue in South Africa. It's an issue here in this country.
Well,
Uh,
when you say gender violence, can you become more specific with what type of violence that we're speaking of? Are we speaking of physical violence? Are we speaking of the suppression and the oppression of people who are choosing other identities as gender, as male and or female?
Gender issues on what is your gender, that's minor. Well, it's not minor, but compared to physical violence, emotional and psychological violence, that's really the big thing.
Mhm.
And so that wasn't properly addressed there in 2024. So that was one of the key things that our small group, was only five of us, brought to the fore. We had the founder of the organization, Miriam Taylor. Her parents are from Angola, but during the freedom fight, they fled and they ended up in Lisbon, Portugal. So she's Afro Portuguese, right? So she's the founder of the organization, Miriam Taylor. You can look her up on LinkedIn. An absolutely amazing woman, lots of credentials. Then we have Jean Pierre, Marty Jean Pierre from Haiti, right? He has several PhDs. He has a school in Haiti. And he also has some projects here in the United States in Maryland. And one of the amazing things that happened in 2024 in Brazil on Zumbi Day, that's the day that they honor their revolutionary leader, black guy Zumbi, for his freedom fight. And so we were touring a space plaza that was honoring him. And this is truly amazing, Senabella. We see a group of people about a block away. They were white, quote white, and they were coming towards us. And then they stopped right there where we were. And it turned out to be the mayor of Rio and the president of France and his wife.
Wow.
They wanted to see this plaza. And so the mayor, after their meeting, brought the president of France to this plaza, and we just happened to be there.
Hmm.
And the most amazing thing is, I don't speak French. My French is very petite,
Hmm.
but Marty, Dr. Marty, he could. And so he ended up having a one-on-one conversation with the president of France for around 10 minutes. That was spontaneous diplomacy, and he was arguing with the president, advocating with the president that they need to rebuild the economy, and France needs to stop demanding Haiti pay reparations to them because they chose to be free and fought for their freedom.
Well, I
That
think
was
that
a conversation. It wasn't in the news,
we're
but
gonna
I'm just
have
saying. So
a lot to discuss. I want to kind of make sure we stay on topic too, because it's important. A lot of people are here because they want to hear about We Were Never Slaves. Um, can we get
let me
into?
before to explain why what happened in South Africa. This is
Uh-huh.
very important.
Please, I
That
apologize. Go ahead.
we were invited to do a presentation, right? We get there, get to the location, this hotel complex near the airport in Johannesburg, and there were 3,000 people under this tent, and so there was no way that the program was going to be the way we were told it was going to be. And so it ended up that everyone couldn't speak, but our group did manage to speak. We offered our interventions, as they were called, and it gave me another opportunity to present to the audience of 3,000 people there. This is the Social Engagement Summit. The idea that we have to have epistemic equity. What does that mean? Epistemic equity. That means there's different ways of viewing the world, Senabella, right? And our language, how we perceive and see the world, quote, reality. Actually, we co-create reality, but that's another subject. Um, we have a right to present our views. Like traditional people have their understanding of healing and illness. And most cases, it conflicts with the Western idea of healing and illness. But if there could be a partnership, a communication between these different ways of knowing, different ways of explaining things, it makes it better for everyone. And so what happened, the presidency of the G20, led by the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, they took, collated, and curated all the recommendations, and he presented the recommendations from the social summit to the governing body, all the rest, the other 19 nations. And one of the most important things that he mentioned was Ubuntu, right? We have to have Ubuntu. You have to recognize me as I recognize you because we're part of each other. We're not simply stewards on this planet, we're part of this planet.
Hmm.
They had never heard of Ubuntu before, the other 19 nations,
Oh, okay.
because we've been told that Africans never had a philosophy. They had never understood life, right? But there's countless civilizations that makes that into a lie. So it was important that that summit happened, even though there was a lot of criticism locally of him, but nonetheless, it did make a difference in other people's eyes from other places around the world. And I got a response. One of the things I said that everyone is talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Well, there's another AI, ancestral intelligence.
Absolutely.
We have to look at our ancestors because our ancestors are still part of us. That's another lecture. I don't have time for that. But if y'all want to come to Atlanta, there's going to be the Pigment Power Conference in Atlanta on February the 5th through the 7th. And there's a whole array of speakers, physicians, doctors, scientists, others who are going to be there and talk about the significance of pigments, all kinds of pigments,
Mm.
what that means for us as a people. So I'll be there in Atlanta, February the 5th through the 6th, the Pigment Power Conference. I can give you a link And I'll be talking about a lot of things there, but mainly about how our brains work. And one of the core ideas to this book, We Were Never Slaves. And that is one of the first things, Senabella, we have to realize, what is the self? What is the self? Where is it?
Yes.
You ever had an operation where you had to undergo general anesthesia? I have 4 times. You disappear. Where do you go?
Mm.
Where do you go, Senator, when you have an operation? But in deep sleep, the fourth stage of sleep, you disappear again. It happens every night that everything that you think you are, believe yourself to be, is gone. I can give technical reasons what happens.
I love that. Just hearing that, it stimulates so many thoughts.
We die every day. Our self dies every day. Every time we enter the fourth stage of sleep, non dreaming, non rapid eye movement sleep with delta waves, everything that makes us up is disconnected. Why? Because the brain has to heal itself. It has to consolidate what you learned the previous day, right? So in order to do that, you yourself has to go offline.
Mm.
You, me, we're a process, not a thing. We're not a thing. And this quote self is very fragile. All you got to do is think about someone who has Alzheimer's, right, or dementia. They can't recognize other people, may not recognize even themselves. There are some people get so serious called the Cotard syndrome where they deny that they even exist.
Mm.
So, what does it have to do with the premise of my book? In medicine, Senabella, there's something known as the placebo effect.
Can you hold on? We're going to come right back. I need to take a quick break, give
Okay.
others a chance to come in the room. It's only going to be a second, and we'll be right back.
What's up, guys? It's Osada, the host of the Gathering of the Griots podcast, part of the Female Solution. Want you to join us every Tuesday morning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And guess what we do? We interview authors of the Soulful Chicago Book Fair. The books, the experiences, the lifestyles, all of it with fervor. So be there right on the Soulful Chicago Book Fair YouTube page or on the Female Solution Facebook page. We look forward to having you and all our literary essence. Peace.
Welcome to Master Force with Mushim Suit. Join us each week on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Central, live on Facebook and YouTube on the Female Solution page, as we dive into powerful topics designed to assist you in mastering your life force. Our conversations feature a diverse lineup of experts, all dedicated to your growth. Tune in weekly to discover new ways to elevate your spirit and raise your vibration. And remember, we are ascending.
Wow, we're back. That's such a profound statement that you made last as we went to break, and I'm excited as we go into unpacking how that relates to your book that you're almost finished with. I'm going to say that because there are other things that have delayed it being completed, but our conversations have been so profound, and every time I go away with so much more enlightenment. So I want to allow the audience to have a lot more of that. So I'm going to. Let's pick up from where we started, where we ended with regard to the awakening, so to speak, of our brain, of our minds and who we are, and we were never slaves.
Okay, so in medicine, there's something known as a placebo effect. That is a substance, sham substance, or suggestion that physical medicines are tested against to see how effective they are, right? And so, they may give you a sugar pill, something that's white, and all the medicine that they're testing may be the same thing to see if it works. And if it works at the same level or better than a placebo, well, then that gives that particular medicine or suggestion credence that it's effective, right? But then there's also something called the nocebo effect. Placebo means in Latin, I please. Nocebo means I harm. And so this is harmful suggestions that, when repeated over and over again, can cause harm to the person's body, even their minds, and they will take on the attributes of that particular word. Now, you may say, oh, words don't harm me. We heard that growing up, that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Well, that's far from the truth, because it's the power of persuasion to convince someone, the other people who's listening, of your particular hypothesis. And so we can trace back, since this is the Female Solution show, when did inequality begin for women? And we can trace that all the way back 2,300 years ago or so to a Athenian or Greek philosopher known as Aristotle. And he is the one who developed the science of inequality when he said that women do not have the right to participate in the assembly, the demos. Women cannot vote, women cannot divorce, women cannot own property, because in many cases, women in ancient Greece and other places were considered as property. So they were non-citizens. And so that idea was expanded during the Roman Empire and other places of the inequality of women. But how could he convince women of their, in his words, inferior status? Well, when a number of Greek influencers or philosophers went to Kemet or Egypt to study, they learned a lot of things there. And one of the things that they learned was rhetorical techniques in order to persuade or convince people or to win an argument. And that gets mistranslated as magic. That was not the committee people's term for authoritative, effective speech. But anyway, that was a tradition that the Greeks expanded upon and extended. And so they taught their students those rhetorical techniques. And so their students learned the techniques of persuasion to convince women that they were less than men, that they were inferior to men. And we see that continuing. In Latin, there's a word for it called ipset dicet, meaning because I say it, it is true. And so people make pronouncements and people believe their pronouncements. Many believe. And so that's where we are today. When I say we were never slaves, first we have to look at the word semantically and trace its origins. Well, when you trace its origins, it goes back to people of Eastern European descent, a collection of different Eastern Europeans known as Slavs. And because they were beat down, oppressed for many centuries, anytime someone came across someone who was oppressed, they said, "Oh, you must be a Slav." Okay, Hunter, where do you get this from? Well, I was invited in 2010 because I met the Consul General of the Czech Republic to come to a gala celebration of the Velvet Revolution. And that was when, under the president, well, he wasn't president then, Václav Havel, they had a nonviolent revolution and kicked the Russians out of the Czech Republic, and it became a free state. And so I met someone at this gala who gave me the whole history of how their ethnic name, Slav, became the brand for bonded slave. And I write about that encounter in this book.
So
slave is a political term. It's a political term. Even the Portuguese, who kicked off what became the transoceanic slave trade, we tend to be caught up with the Atlantic side. But the quote slave trade went all the way to Indonesia. I went to the Slave Museum in Cape Town, and they have maps showing the routes of ships from Portugal all the way to Southeast Asia and then to India. And then they were brought to South Africa, and many of them were transported all the way to West Africa. I saw the maps. So,
Professor Hunter, let me ask a question.
Yes.
So in the book, We Were Never Slaves, let's try to become a little bit closer to that title. When you say we were never slaves, are all these things what has culminated for us to understand we were never slaves, or we were never slaves because of what?
Well, first, think of it this way. When were Africans not human?
Okay.
What's the answer? We never were not human.
Yeah.
We've always been human beings. Someone put a label on us, whether it was the Arabs or Europeans. Someone put a label that this population are not human and we can treat them as we want to treat them. So that's the most important thing. Slave is a political term. And where I was going, in Portugal, you had someone known as Henry the Navigator, right? He navigated from Portugal eventually to South Africa, and others followed him, right? When they started bringing captured Africans, they weren't called Africans then, to Portugal to become domestics and do other chores, right? They were called ransom captives. They were not called servants or slaves.
Ransom captives.
Ransom captives. Because why ransom captives? When you take someone and their family or whoever wants them back, what do you have to do? You have to pay a ransom. That's what the term was.
Well, just so really quickly, in this sort of evidentiary of some comments that are how things are being defined and what's happening to today's government, when they went to Venezuela and they say, we kidnapped, right? We kidnapped Maduro, right?
Yes.
So his son said, we want him back or we're going to go to war with you, right? So they didn't put up a ransom for his return, even though they said they kidnapped him. So the terminology doesn't fit the imprisonment and the taking of him. Is that so?
He was extracted. That's the technical language. He wasn't kidnapped, right? He was extracted because he was deemed as a criminal and threat to the United States. That's the logical reasoning for that. But the word slave didn't exist prior to the 6th century because Slavic people didn't exist. So if you go to Ephesians 5, I believe, slaves obey your masters. If you read that in English, at the time that was written, the word didn't exist. It's a deliberate mistranslation in English because in Latin, the word was servants. That's where service comes from, that you are serving someone. You are serving your parents. You are serving the king. You are serving God.
So we have in America, we have a lot of we are the melting pot, right? Every kind of people from every place on the earth have moved into America, correct?
Right.
And so with them comes their terminologies, the way they speak, how they live, their whole cultural being, right, is a part of what is here. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is to say that with all that being the case, right, how is it that we have become slaves out from servants, right? And in that coming about, how do we transform from that into we were never slaves, and now we understand that we were never slaves, into the freedom of thought, which is the process in which you began this with, thinking about how we have to reframe ourselves. We go to sleep, we wake up, and we're sort of reborn into a new sort of beginning.
Well, the second day of Kwanzaa, that's a celebration that started by Malana Karinga in 1966, because he felt that our culture, that is the culture of African people in the United States from 1518, not simply 1619, that we need to free ourselves from this propaganda and disinformation of how we've been defined or framed. And so the second principle of Kwanzaa is Kujichagulia, or self-determination, that we have the right to determine who we are. We have the right to determine our destiny. We have the right to do a Sankofa process, that is to go back and look at our history and to bring that history forward in the present as to how we should live. So in 2023, when I went to Portugal for this Humanities Summit, our first stop was in a city called Lagos, not Lagos, Nigeria, but Lagos, Portugal, on the southern coast. And we went there because there's what they call the Slave Market Museum. And the Slave Market Museum was the attempt of the city to cover over some horrific finds in the city, that during the process of excavating an underground parking garage in 2009, they found the remains of around 158 people, men, women, and children, in a sinkhole that was used as a garbage dump. They uncovered 400 years of garbage that was piled on top of these bodies. And these bodies were the first captives that were brought to Portugal. And after they were used up, they were tossed into a sinkhole and garbage was piled on top of them. And why is that significant for me? Because I believe from doing an African ancestry test, and on my father's side, he had Portuguese ancestors. And so for me, I haven't done the genetic comparison yet, but that's something I'm going to do, that we held a ceremony to restore their dignity. And that's one of the big points of this book, is to restore the dignity of the deceased for what they went through. We have to recognize them as human beings, right? not as an object, even though they may have been someone else's legal fiction of property, because you can't own another person. You have to convince yourself that you own them, but you're only owning the labor that they are doing for you.
That's a very profound statement. Let's take Dr. David Boykin came into the room. Good morning, David. He said, I just tuned in when Dr. Adams started talking about Aristotle disrespecting women. Is he saying we were never slaves literally, in the sense that some people who look like you and I say that you are indigenous to Americas, and that they ancestors were not Africans brought here by slave ships?
That's a very good question, because I hear that a lot. Here's the deal on that, to answer that definitively. I have a dear friend for 40 years, Kamal Siddiqui. He's a hydraulic engineer and an underwater archaeologist. I would submit to the audience that they see the Netflix movie, I'm not promoting Netflix, Descendant. He was one of the divers from the diving team, Divers with a Purpose, mainly a group of melanated African American divers who have been going around the world finding sunken, quote, floating prisons, also called slave ships. And they found the Clotilda in Mobile, Alabama. And Kamal will tell you, the records say, there were 30,000 voyages of transporting from Europe, from Africa to the Americas, North and South Americas. There's documents that lists each ship, right? So anyone who says Africans, quote African, because they were from their various ethnic groups, they weren't Africans then, were not brought here, but they were indigenous, quote, brown people here already, that's preposterous, because there's data to back that up. They have the manifest of the ships. The manifest of the ships tell you where the particular person was extracted from. I don't say kidnapped, they were extracted. They tell you where they went. They tell you how many were lost on the journey, right? Because many jumped overboard. They rather die and eaten by sharks than go to this unknown situation. So we have to dispense with that nonsense, because folks don't want to say, they feel ashamed of the treatment. You have to look at where that response is coming from, because we were taught to be ashamed. The reason why I wrote this book, Senabella, was because I can never forget when I was a child going to my church, Salem Lutheran Church, on 74th and Calumet, which, by the way, was around the corner from Al Capone's house, one of his houses. I just throw that in. And a white boy in the church, because the church was primarily Swedish and German immigrants, because Black people were just moving into Chatham. And it was one Sunday, a white boy said, "Oh, you're just like the Hebrews in Egypt. You are slaves." And I started tearing up. And my Sunday school teacher, Miss Esther Dixon, said, don't worry, God loves you and I love you, right? And so that has haunted me for over 50 years. So I wanted to know, where does that come from? How could he say that? And it was only in 2009 at a Kwanzaa celebration that I just blurted out, because it was Kujichagulia, that we have to define ourselves. We were not slaves. We've always been human beings. And that's how this book project started.
So how do you view, we're talking about the manifestation of our mentality based upon what has been going on with us here in America and say even around the world. There are so many enslaved societies. Let's just get honest about that. America is just one of the most profound places, but it's been in Europe, it's been everywhere. And as we continue to grow into, say, newer understandings, greater values, looking to advance our lives into more freer state of consciousness, awareness, and and becoming more capable as human beings, what are some of the things that you outline in your book that you have upcoming that will be, say, like a 1, 2, 3 that you can share with us here today that will help people to understand not only should I run and get this book, but it's also going to provide these here kind of responses or suggestions or answers?
Well, one of the first things is we have to dispense of the notion, the mistaken notion that Darwin has had was survival of the fittest. Now, all the evidence is contrary to that. There was survival of the friendliest. Could you cooperate with people? If it was constant competition, that leads to constant suspicion of who you're coming in contact with. And so that leads to a recursive sense of mistrust. So if that continued, then we wouldn't be here today. And one of the most important things is cooperation. That was one of the things that in my presentation that I gave at the World Psychiatric Congress in Prague, Czech Republic in October of last year, is that I have developed with my friend, now an ancestor, Patricia Ann Newton, a transcultural forensic psychiatrist, a different way of looking at, quote, the self. And our self is a mosaic of different qualities and attributes. And so one of the things that I talk about at the end is describing this idea of a mosaic self model, that when you're dreaming, for example, where do the dream characters, the dream objects, the dream house come from? You're asleep. Do you stop to think about, well, where do these images come from? Because my consciousness is shut off. It's shut off because the visual cortex in the back of our heads is now offline. So all the images that you have are being generated from within you. That, as in the movie The Matrix, we're running simulations all the time. And we're running simulations of what we believe someone else is thinking or what they believe. And so we have to learn that many ideas are just hypotheses, right? Mm-hmm. So how many denominations of Christianity are there? There's thousands. How many denominations of Islam are there? There's many, because different people have different hypotheses of what Christianity means to them.
And all of that has played part and parcel to enslavement to a greater degree. Is that correct?
Which means to me, Harriet Tubman's idea of Jesus was not the idea that her, quote, enslavers had of Jesus. So today we have Christian nationalists who have a different idea of Jesus. So the question is, if you go to Nice, France, or to Poland, you see all these Black Madonnas and a child, right? A child with very dark skin. But Senabella, we don't see those images in the American media when they show pictures of Jesus, right? So why are statues, and I saw some in Prague, Czech Republic, myself when I visited several Catholic churches. Why is there a Black Madonna and a child, a Black child, or a dark-skinned woman and this dark-skinned child in a European country.
So clearly we've been embedded through imagery, through language, through the transport and changes of our physical bodies. I'm speaking of African American or African people, people who have been enslaved wherever they may be. There are different types of things that transform our thought process into slavery, into becoming enslaved. And if I'm not hearing you mistakenly, you were saying also that it has also been part and parcel to how we understand and know what, say, our religious ideas and or ways of life are as well. And even Dr. Latif, she put here the idea that the fact that women have been enslaved to men. So when we say we were never slaves, there are different iterances of what that means, different ideologies, different ways.
In this writing of what I mean. And one of the most important things is every society has a social stratification. There's the people at the top and most of the people at the bottom. And many of the people at the top have more privileges because of various reasons than the vast populace. Slavery was a system of oppression, right? There was no concept of ownership of a person in ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. They didn't have the concept of owning a person as in Greece, as in the Levant or Palestine, whatever you want to call it. They did not have that idea. Now, what they had in Kemet was conscripted labor, meaning that you are going to labor under, in many cases, horrible conditions for the state or for other wealthy family. But you were not owned. You were not considered as property. That's a very important distinction. And so most African societies and others, you still had the gradations of the social order, but it was oppression. I don't use the word slave or enslavement. It was oppression, meaning that someone was restricting your capacity of being a human being, of living. And a lot of people under horrible circumstances, war, they became embedded in someone else's culture to be worked to death, or orphans. There's a lot of reasons why someone got into that state. So I totally dismiss the word slave because it still refers back to Slavic people, right? Why should a people's name for themselves be used as a brand for torture, terror, and trepidation?
And from what I understand, when you met this here gentleman that you spoke of, who shared with you about the Slavic history, they too don't even want to be referred to in that terminology. Am I wrong?
Absolutely, yeah. Because they're still traumatized by that today. That's why there's no more Czechoslovakia. There's no more Yugoslavia, because they want to dispense with the Slavia portion of it, because it reminds them of their oppression.
So let me get to this here, something more simple. When we say when you say it reminds us of our oppression, what about the word Negro, nigga? How about that also reminds us of oppression? So we've been trying to accept or reject these words, and it's all a part of us in transforming. That's one of the biggest arguments. I mean, right now people use it as like it's a loving endearment. That's my nigga, that kind of thing. So what are some of the steps that we have to take in order to just rid ourselves of it? Is it going to be an individual wash, brain cleanser? Like what you said, you go back, you go to sleep, you reboot, and we reawake. Will your book cover some of these things that we're speaking here today of, like this question?
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar said in his song, "They not like us," right? Right? Who is the they that's not like us?
Okay.
Who is the us? And so when we look at who we are, our long strand of history, like the Sahara was not always a desert, right? There was a period 7,000 years ago when it was green. They called that the Green Sahara, and there were civilizations there. They're finding boats in Chad that have been buried for 8,000 years. And so we understand this long view of history, not this millisecond, nanosecond view of history of being caught in this situation. Then we'll have a different perspective ourselves. Then we can generate different hypotheses of who we are when we know that every night yourself disappears. And so every day you have a new chance to be reborn again in the light of new consciousness every day. So we can change, but we live in a society that reinforces the old way of viewing ourselves as dependent, childlike, highly emotional, irrational, all of those things, the classic stereotypes. But every day we can decide that I reject that I'm not that. I'm part and parcel of this entire universe. I'm part and parcel of the divine, however one wants to define that.
Well, on that, I'm going to take a break, and I'd like to ask someone to just put in a question for Professor Hunter Adams to answer and respond to. We're close at the hour. We're going to take a minute, come back with that question. If anyone has a question you'd like to ask and have answered through Professor Hunter Adams, we'll be right back, and we'll do it then. I hope everybody's listening, waiting, wanting, and hopefully taking in all of this here wonderful information that helps us to grow to become better people ourselves, starting with self, the reawakening of self. I'll be right back.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
And in case you didn't notice the resemblance, we're also three sisters.
We're going to be coming to you every week, sharing our successes and our mistakes as we navigate our lives as moms, wives, sisters, daughters, and of course, Black women in today's world.
We'll talk about it all: race, politics, religion, economics, culture, and we'll take a look at everything from whether or not to use corporal punishment to how do you teach your children about sex.
Look for our upcoming book, Growing Up Charles. It's a personal story about our lives growing up in Maple Park on Chicago's South Side. I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms. Follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Three Black Moms.
Look, we only got a few minutes, but I want to put this up because one of my sisters here on the channel, Mama Africa, she's having a fundraiser to save the building that she's in, saving it by one, purchasing it and maintaining herself there, not only as a resident with a store, but as an owner of the building in South Shore at 71st. So you can see here at the bottom, you can still donate to the GoFundMe. She's trying to raise the most of the amount has been raised, but still behind by thousands of dollars. You go to her GoFundMe and give $1, give $5, send $1,000, 10. As we said, we can get 10 businesses to give $1,000 a piece. But part of our freeing ourselves from enslavement is to share together in the victory of the lack of enslavement. And that's working together collectively. So please, let's keep that at the bottom of the screen as we close out. I'm going to bring Professor Hunter Adams back. We're at the close of our hour. We won't be able to take a question like I hope we would, but I want to bring you back and say thank you so much for coming in today. We have to have you come back so we can get in deeper to why we were never slaves and how we were never slaves will change holistically within us in order to become a better us. And us being all people, but specifically for those of us who have been affected by it to the extent in which we cannot even figure out how to live our lives together.
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to coming back.
Wow, thank you so much for being here. It's been my honor, and I look forward to having you back soon. Everyone, as myself, I'm sure we're just so grateful for your time and your conversation. You've traveled all over the world and continue to do so. Blessings upon blessings upon blessings upon blessings on all your work. And we look forward to your book, We Were Never Slaves.
And I'm looking forward to your next CD too.
Okay, that's coming, so we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna have some music shows coming up. Everybody, thank you so much for showing up. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share this here podcast. We are with the Female Solution. Thank you so much, Dr. Naima Latif, for having us here and to be a part of this groundbreaking series of shows, podcasts that present so many different cultural ideas and ways of living. Everything from starting a business, creating new mindsets, everything. It's all here right with the Female Solution with the sisters here. I'm Senabella. It's been my pleasure. Thank you all so much for supporting me. God bless you in your day. And I look forward to having you. I'm going to close out with a little of this, and then we're going to go.
We've come to the end of our show today. If you missed any broadcasts, go to our website for the audio and video archives at www.thefemalesolution.com. On behalf of our team of radio hosts, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in today's discussions. And to our global family joining us from all around the world, we say thank you. To our family in China, xie xie. India, dhanyavad. Japan, arigato. Korea, kamsamnida. Russia, spasiba. Germany, danke. Poland, dziękuję. France, merci. Spain, gracias. Italy, grazie. Egypt, shukran. Ghana, madasi. Nigeria, eshe. South Africa, Ngiyabonga. Senegal, Jaref. Kenya, Asante. Israel, Toda. Pakistan, Shukriya. Afghanistan, Tashakur. Saudi Arabia and Palestine, Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you, and may peace be upon you and the mercy of God and God's blessings.